Have you ever played a PlayStation, watched a Sony TV, used their camera, or listened to music through their audio systems? Chances are you have. Sony is everywhere inside our living rooms, in our hands, on our screens, even in cutting-edge cars and robots. But here's the shocking part. This global empire that defines entertainment and technology today started with something as simple as an electric rice cooker, and it failed. From those humble, uncertain beginnings in post-war Japan, Sony rose to dominate the world stage. From radios and televisions to Walkmans, home theaters, gaming consoles, and even futuristic robotics, Sony didn't just create products, it reshaped how we live, play, and experience the world. Its journey from a tiny workshop in Tokyo to becoming a global cultural powerhouse is filled with bold risks, groundbreaking inventions, and world-changing ideas. This is the story of how Sony went from making a failed rice cooker to taking over the world. Sony's story begins in 1946, right after World War II, when Japan was devastated both economically and socially. Masaru Ibuka and Akio Morita, two visionaries, founded Tokyo Tsushin Kogyo, Tokyo Telecommunications Engineering Corporation, with a tiny capital of 190,000 yen, roughly $500 at the time. Their dream was not just to repair radios or build gadgets, but to spark innovation in Japanese technology. The first few years were tough. Japan had limited resources, and consumer electronics were still a luxury. Yet the founders believed that technology could rebuild the nation. Their early inventions, like the rice cooker and tape recorder, didn't become massive hits, but they set the tone for Sony's philosophy: experiment, innovate, and never settle for mediocrity. In 1955, the company introduced Japan's first transistor radio, the TR-55. This moment marked a turning point. Not only did it put Sony on the global map, but it also introduced Japanese electronics to the West. Soon after, the company changed its name to Sony, a blend of sonus, Latin for sound, and sunny boy, symbolizing youthful energy and innovation. Sony's transistor radio was just the beginning. By the 1960s, Sony became synonymous with portable and reliable electronics. Unlike its competitors, who focused on affordability, Sony positioned itself as a premium brand. This move paid off, as consumers worldwide associated Sony with quality and cutting-edge technology. In 1960, Sony opened its first American branch, Sony Corporation of America. This was a bold step because, at the time, Japanese products were still seen as cheap knockoffs. Sony, however, challenged this stereotype by delivering products like the world's first direct-view portable TV, the TV 8-301. These innovations proved Japan could lead, not just follow. The introduction of the Trinitron TV in 1968 revolutionized home entertainment. Its superior picture quality and unique single-gun 3-cathode design won an Emmy Award for engineering. This wasn't just a television, it was a cultural statement. Sony showed the world that Japanese innovation could surpass even American and European giants. In 1979, Sony changed the world forever with the launch of the Walkman. This simple-looking portable cassette player wasn't just an electronic device, it was a lifestyle invention. For the first time in history, people could carry their music with them anywhere. The Walkman didn't just sell millions of units, it redefined youth culture. Before the Walkman, music was tied to large stereos or home systems. Sony broke that boundary, making music personal and mobile. Teenagers, athletes, and travelers embraced it as more than a gadget. It became a symbol of freedom and individuality. The Walkman made headphones cool, a cultural shift that still influences how we consume music today. By the 1980s, Walkman sales had skyrocketed past 100 million units. This global success not only cemented Sony's dominance in electronics, but also influenced fashion, advertising, and pop culture. Sony wasn't just selling devices, it was creating experiences. Sony realized early on that controlling hardware wasn't enough. Content was just as important. In 1988, Sony made a bold move by acquiring CBS Records, one of the world's largest music companies. Just a year later, it purchased Columbia Pictures, a Hollywood giant. These acquisitions transformed Sony into a powerhouse that didn't just make devices, it owned the music and movies played on them. Owning content gave Sony a unique edge. Competitors could sell TVs or music players, but only Sony could integrate hardware with its own library of movies and music. This strategy was revolutionary at the time and laid the groundwork for the modern concept of ecosystem integration, which companies like Apple later perfected. The Columbia Pictures acquisition, however, was risky. Hollywood insiders doubted whether a Japanese company could succeed in the American movie business. Yet Sony produced hits like Men in Black, Spider-Man, and later co-owned rights to Marvel's most iconic superhero franchises. This proved that Sony wasn't just an electronics company, it was a cultural empire. If the Walkman was Sony's cultural breakthrough, the PlayStation was its global empire builder. In the early 1990s, Sony entered the gaming industry almost by accident. Initially, Sony collaborated with Nintendo to build a CD-based gaming console, but the deal collapsed. Instead of backing down, Sony launched its own console in 1994, the PlayStation. The PlayStation was a revolution. Its use of CDs allowed for larger, more complex games with better graphics and audio than cartridge-based competitors. Titles like Final Fantasy VII, Gran Turismo, and Metal Gear Solid turned the PlayStation into a cultural phenomenon. By 2005, Sony had sold over 100 million units of the original console. Success continued with the PlayStation 2, launched in 2000. It became the best-selling console of all time, with over 155 million units sold worldwide. The PlayStation wasn't just a gaming device, it was a complete entertainment hub that played DVDs, music, and games. This positioned Sony at the center of living rooms worldwide. By the 2000s, Sony wasn't just an electronics brand, it was a global giant spanning multiple industries. Its portfolio covered everything from gaming and music to movies, financial services, and semiconductors. The strategy was clear: dominate every corner of the entertainment and technology ecosystem. However, this diversification came with challenges. Sony faced stiff competition from Apple in portable music players, Samsung in TVs, and Microsoft in gaming. Despite these challenges, Sony remained resilient by focusing on innovation and leveraging its entertainment assets. For example, while Apple had the iPod, Sony still had exclusive music and movie rights through its subsidiaries. Sony also invested heavily in image sensors and camera technology, becoming the world's leading supplier of camera sensors used in iPhones, Samsung phones, and other high-end devices. Even when Sony wasn't the brand on the device, its technology powered the competition. From a tiny workshop in war-torn Japan to a global empire of technology and entertainment, Sony's rise is one of the greatest business stories in history. The company didn't just make gadgets, it redefined how people interact with technology and culture. From the transistor radio and Walkman to the PlayStation and Hollywood movies, Sony shaped modern life in ways few companies ever could. So the answer to how Sony took over the world is simple: by daring to innovate, by shaping culture, and by never being afraid to dream bigger than anyone thought possible. If you enjoyed this story of Sony's rise to global power, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories of innovation, business empires, and world-changing ideas.